Techno music was created in Detroit back in the mid to late 80s, and it's credited to Juan, Atkins, Derrick, and Kevin Saunderson.
If you ask somebody from Detroit that was around in the beginnings of the music, what is techno music, they would say, oh, that's Derrick, that's Juan, that's the guys.
Rock, we got alternative rock, so why we can't have alternative, urban alternative or alternative soul?
They took aspects of gospel, they took aspects of blues, they took all that, and they just took it and just molded it and deconstructed it and made it into this form that's unbelievable.
Every piece of music has an open door that intersects with another sound.
Fuck all the fluffy IDM, all that crazy shit. This is the real facts of how this shit started.
It was just breaking overseas. There wasn't money, there wasn't fame. It was just music. And it was just futuristic music and sounds that you'd never heard before.
You say Detroit techno and it means something to people. It triggers an emotional response more than just a genre.
Techno music is underground dance music. You know, high-tech soul.
Detroit can be a heaven for some, it can be a hell for others.
This is the back of the house where the stuff got made. I think it has to be said that Detroit is an unrelenting success story.
Detroit is a weird city in that it doesn't have, it might be a big city, but it doesn't have the big city mentality.
In a city like Detroit, where it's as desolate as it could be, it's not a horrible city, but it's a horribly designed city.
In a way, there's not much down here, but there's a heart, and there's something that makes it much more than what you see.
We don't have a thriving, bustling downtown area where all the tourists go and they go do the shopping and hang out at the club. We don't have that.
Detroit is lovely. Detroit is beautiful.
Now you got to realize, at the time in Detroit, you're talking about serious economic downturn, recession from the early 80s. They were still getting over oil embargoes and whatnot from the 70s. There was the white flight, there was divestiture from the city. Downtown was laying in shambles.
The white flight of Detroit is a myth in the sense that there was no such thing as flight. Flight denominates a sudden pattern of behavior like a flight of birds taking up off of a pond. By 1953, the city of Detroit had already established the patterns of ex-urban depopulation that people associate with post-1967. The U.S. government were involved in making it advantageous for people under the aegis of the GI Bill, for example, not to come back and live in cities after the Second World War, but to move to suburbia. The city was completely built. That is the point then, if you wanted a new house, you had to move to suburbia.
We were your classic Rust Belt city. Everybody moved to the burbs, a lot of vacant buildings, a lot of burnt out hulls.
So to say in 1967 something terrible happened, those people, whoever those people are, did something awful to my city and now I had to leave is simply nonsense. That's a bunch of nostalgic rot.
The city was fast becoming majority black. We didn't have a lot of resources.
What happened in 1967 specifically in Detroit is that a long pattern of exclusionary practices and a long pattern of segregation, both legal and quasi-legal in the city, simply erupted into violence.
How do you feel about it? I think that if they pull the troops out, then detention would be all over and everybody would go back to normal.
And those who engage in looting or arson or sniping or other illegal actions will have to pay the consequences.
All I can say is, I hope it ends quickly.
Then it became convenient to say, that's why we did what we did, instead of investigating the actual reasons why we did what we did. That is, we decided to depopulate cities at the end of World War II. We didn't decide to depopulate cities the day after the so-called riot in 1967. When somebody asks me, will the city ever come back, I tell them, it's back. It never went anyplace. You left, maybe, but the city never did.
Y'all the ones that left. No, we here.
City's still here. Now, of course, the city has economic problems, social problems, etc. Right, okay. The city is doing as well as could be expected and probably better. for what has happened. Capital left, the tax base, or a big piece of it left.
Imagine a city that was designed for 4 million people that less than 1 million people only occupy now.
We were brought up on our parents going to work every day and working in the car automotive industry and coming back home and telling us that they worked with robots.
There was a lot of fallout based on things switching over to automation and computers and robotics taking over where people once worked and thrived. But it wasn't really a bad thing. It was just the city was in transition to a technological base.
People don't have money to buy food or clothing or other things, necessities and luxuries that we like to enjoy, then these attitudes usually come out in our music.
What has happened is that something extraordinary and wonderful and unique has happened instead of what every other city has. We got space, and it's not just space that's empty, it's space that's full of the artifacts of American industrial culture. It's a place like no other. It provides food for people's imaginations in a way that no other site does. And it has a great deal to do with the insertion of urban techno into this cultural and social domain.
We have 3 incredible natural resources: fresh water, salt, and techno.
I do not remember Detroit changing since I was a little boy. That's when there was people walking on the street. That's when there was businesses on the street. That's when there was some sort of social level here. You could actually meet people. There are some really fascinating people in the city, but you'll never meet them because nobody walks. Nobody walks. Nobody talks, and so nobody walks. So nobody talks, and nobody walks, nobody walks, nobody talks.
It can get pretty boring at times. And so, you know, in order to pass the time or to get out of that, you have to find other things to do.
I'm 38 years old. I haven't seen any change. You know, in 28 years, nothing. 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 Nothing! The only change that I've really seen here is us. You know, we have changed, but the city has not.
Detroit's a tough city. It's had a rough time historically, and it's almost like the eye of a storm that just had never, you know, recovered.
But